adoption of the agenda, please.
Resolve the agenda for the meeting be adopted as circulated.
Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Bazarowicz, Councillor Horvis seconds. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. The first item on our agenda, which is number 3, are bylaws. We have a couple of bylaws that we'll be working on today. The first one is bylaw number 12 of 2020, and it is for some borrowing of funds to upgrade and expand the facilities and services of the East Selkirk Water Treatment Plant. I'm going to get Deepak to kind of walk us through it a little bit. We do have our municipal board order, which approved it with some minor changes, I believe. And please remember that it is third reading, so when we come to the resolutions, we'll have to make sure that we keep our hands up for the recorded vote. So Deepak, if you could just walk us through a bit of the discussion or a bit of the correspondence on the bylaw.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you've already identified, that this is the bylaw to borrow funds associated with the expansion and creating the soft water system for the Selkirk Water Treatment Plant, along with a truck bill that was going to be added to that project. This is 50% funded with the Manitoba Water Services Board, and this was the funding that we had held the first reading and the second reading. The second reading was our public hearing. There were no objections. There were several supports, and this went to the municipal board for approval. The municipal board reviewed it and identified some minor edits that they recommended in their order. Those edits were specifically that we approve as we approve for third reading, that they asked that that we change clause number 3 in the bylaw, which had the date of 31st of December 2021, and replace it with the first day of January 2021, or sorry, as our beginning of the day. The main reason being, although we are paying for our borrowing at the end of the year, it is we are looking at starting to acquire the funds at the better rate starting this year. So that's the intent here, because normally when you do the borrowing bylaws, you would normally get an opportunity to do the amending bylaws after the fact. And this time we're doing both of those at the same time for the borrowing, for the approval of the funds. So those changes have been made, as well as we have a filing fee that we would have to submit. And the bylaw that's been provided to you, along with the schedule, have been provided for council with those changes put in for bylaw number 12 of 2020.
Thank you for that, Deepak. Any questions from members of council regarding bylaw 12 of 2020? Go ahead, Councillor Spicer.
So the date change isn't really for a payment, it's to allow the borrowing of the funds.
Correct. As you will see, Councillor, when we get to the amending bylaws, the schedule is laid out in there and identifies that.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, if you have the bylaw for third reading, we will go ahead with that. I don't believe that there are any further questions from members of council.
Resolved, bylaw number 12 of 2020 being a bylaw for the expenditure and borrowing of funds to upgrade and expand the facilities and services of the East Selkirk Water Treatment Plant be given third reading as amended.
Okay, and remember it is third reading, so keep your hands up. Moved by Councillor Belanger, seconded by Councillor Strang. Any discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Horvis, do you have a question? No? Okay, any questions before I call for the vote? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Okay, 3 2 on our agendas is bylaw number 3 of 2020, and that is to expend and borrow funds to construct and establish phase 1 of the South St. Clements utility infrastructure, and that again is for third reading. And Deepak, if you could go over that for us, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As been identified in the description, what we're looking at is borrowing the funds in order to put the twin sewer mains from Lockport to the East Selkirk Lagoon. This is a project that's also been requested as part of our ISEP funding, and we've also made a request for some grant funds with the Manitoba Water Services Board. Neither of those which have been approved to date, but the decision of council was that if they were approved, that would be a benefit in overall expansion of that capacity, but these funds are enough to be able to do the project ourselves if necessary, considering we do have concerns of cost overruns as well as inflationary increases that have happened. Perfect example would be the Manitoba Water Services Board worked with the water treatment plant, which had a 100% increase because of the delays in the construction. So what we're looking at is moving forward with this. It went to the, it had second reading, and again, there were no direct objections to it. There was a letter of concern overall, but and we had letters of support. As part of this, it went to the municipal board for approval, and the municipal board approved it with some specific requests for changes. They requested us to change. One of those changes is specifically related with making sure that the language describing the project and the whereas clause are all consistent, and they felt that it was important to have that level of consistency. So they asked us to do delete our second whereas clause and delete the sixth whereas clause. In the case of the second whereas clause, they asked us to make a change, basically for the description itself. They felt the sixth whereas clause wasn't needed anymore, and then delete the clause number 2 and replace it with, again, the description to be consistent. And then in clause number 3 was similar to this one, because again, we are borrowing, and this is taking advantage of the funding. As you may recall, I had this as part of my presentation where I suggested that we had to do the bylaw with the recommended borrowing authority amount of 4% as the provincial rate that they were recommending, but we had already negotiated 2.83 if we were able to move forward on this, and we will be using the 2.83, and that's why we'll be borrowing the money in advance as opposed to after substantial completion, as would happen. Normally, after substantial completion, what's happening is they're using your line of credit to pay for that cost until such time it's complete. Now we won't need to draw on our line of credit at all during this project. And the project is on very aggressive timelines as well.
Questions? Go ahead, Councillor Bazarowicz.
So we're not going to draw on our line of credit, but we're going to borrow in advance, so are we not paying from day one interest?
We are paying from day one on interest. If it was a multi-year project, that interest would have been taken into consideration. If the project completes within the same year, there's very little of a difference. And if you apply the 2.83% payment over 20 years, regardless of when you started, it is significantly different than having a 4%. And we have, in the sense of achieving that sense of surety that we can take advantage of these low interest rates, because by the time the project completes, we have no guarantee that the low interest rates will still be there.
So the line of credit was 4% then?
Our line of credit is at a high, it doesn't give us very much. The issue is that after, it's regardless of the line of credit, that's not where the interest rate issue is. It's the, when you're substantially complete, what will the interest rates be then if you're borrowing? The province of Manitoba feels that to play it safe, it should be, normal indications are it would be probably around the 3 to 4%. This is 2.83, and that is a significant savings. especially for the 4%.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have any questions regarding bylaw number 13 of 2020? If I could ask our CAO to please read the resolution then, and remember it's again third reading, so you'll keep your hands up till we have the vote.
Resolved, bylaw 13 of 2020 being a bylaw for the expenditure and borrowing of funds to construct and establish phase 1 of the South St. Clements utility infrastructure be given third reading as amended.
Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Spicer, Councillor Sutherland seconds. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Okay, I believe we have one more bylaw to deal with this morning, or actually two. Bylaw number 8 of 2021, and that is to amend 12 of 2020.
Correct, Madam Mayor. What we are looking at is now, normal case, course of business would be that you would establish a borrowing bylaw and then come back with an amending bylaw for the borrowing at the time of substantial completion. The example I would give you is the Narrow Fire Hall. The Narrow Fire Hall the funding was borrowed, it was completed after a period of time, and then we came forward with an amending bylaw in order to get the approval of the exact interest rate that we would get associated to that. That's when we would normally negotiate, and that's what you would determine on. In this case, now that we have these, and because of the requirements of the province, in our first bylaw, we had to identify a 4% interest rate. Now what we're doing is now we're moving forward with the borrowing immediately. So bylaw 8 is to do the borrowing of that $2 million at 2.83%.
Okay. That's, it's different than we normally do it, like it's a different process, because
Correct.
normally we wouldn't do this until after.
Normally, we wouldn't do this until the substantial completion. As I mentioned earlier, we would be using our line of credit to pay for these types of expenses until such time we're ready to borrow. In this case, because of the 2.83, and the Royal Bank was only able to give us a guarantee till the end of March approximately as to the best, to this very low interest rate, it was important to get it done.
Councillor Spicer.
Okay, I'm going to test your memory a little bit. I believe that our administration had done a comparison between the 2.83 and the 4%, and based on both bylaws, I think we were saving about $500,000 in interest.
It was approximately that, and you are testing by memory. Do you have the exact numbers in front of me?
I don't know the exact number, but I remember it being about $500,000.
Correct.
So that's kind of why, like, I know it's different than what is normally done, but to save $500,000 in interest, it makes sense on both.
And
Both bylaws put together.
And remember, one of the things that we did show as a comparison as part of that analysis was that we borrowed, when we went out to borrow, we had our 2020 budget, which showed what our costs of borrowing were under those. So once we reduced, so we took a look at reducing our South St. Clements because we only needed to worry about the building costs, and we looked at reducing our drainage budget because we only had to deal with projects that were without Guns Creek diversion as part of that entire plan. So we saved $2 million from the drainage budget. We saved $2 million of borrowing from our South St. Clements but went out and borrowed $5.5 million. Sorry, 2.5 and $2 million, and we went out to borrow 5.5. So we increased our borrowing capacity by $1 million at minimum. With that borrowing capacity, $1 million, our payments that were projected in 2020 for our previous borrowing, these payments include for that additional $1 million are going to be less on a yearly basis than what we would have. So theoretically, we have significantly saved funds.
Okay, I'm good. Any 8 of 2021. I'm not seeing any hands go up, so Deepak, if you would like to read the resolution for us, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Resolved, bylaw 8 of 2021 being to amend bylaw 12 of 2020, which provided for the expenditure and borrowing of funds to upgrade and expand the facilities and services of the East Southwick Water Treatment Plant be given first reading.
Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Sutherland, Councillor Spicer seconds. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Okay, we have one more bylaw, number 9 of 2021, and basically it's more or less the same thing. It's to borrow the funds now and for the utility. Go ahead, please, Deepak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's the same situation. Now it's for the $3.5 million for the borrowing. We're going to be getting it at 2.83%. Again, we're moving forward with the amending bylaw as quickly as possible so that we can begin the construction this year as soon as possible. The intent of this is that there are savings. As mentioned earlier, because of the 2.83%, we're doing something unique, which is borrowing the money in advance of construction. The advantage on both of these are both of those projects are going to be constructed in the year 2021, so borrowing is over a very short period of time when we'll be expending those dollars. For bylaw number 9 of 2021, it's an amending bylaw. Both of these amending bylaws will then go to the municipal board for final approval, and then we'll come back for second and third reading.
Thank you for that. Any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Sutherland.
Yeah, just kind of fill me in here on how this works. I think for all this board, so when do we actually borrow it?
As soon as we get the approval from the municipal board, which could be as early as end of March, as of like end of next week, we may be able to get that, or as early as April, at which point we will then have the authority to borrow the funds from the Royal Bank. Those funds are now available for us to utilize in our projects. So now we can go out to tender, do those projects, and once the construction begins, we will have our progress payments on the project as well.
So we have the authority to borrow, but say it's still until let's say the South St. Clements, we need money to start that project. We're authorized to borrow, let's say at the end of March, fairly speaking. When we don't use the money till say April. But are we still making payments at the end of March on this money?
We make payments on December 31st of every year. So we get the money available, and our payment is on a yearly basis at December 31st of 2021, and the next payment. So as an example, Councillor, what I'll bring up is the bylaw itself, and I'll show you the schedule to outline that. And in the schedule, let me just do a quick share for everyone. So there's the schedule of the, let me just make it large enough so that everyone can see it. So what you see is the description of the amending bylaw. The biggest difference on there, it's identifying the 3.5%, and what it's saying is that we borrow at 2.83% in the overall whereas clauses on this. Based on that 2.83%, here are the repayment terms. And so if you'll notice, we get the money available as March 31st of $3.5 million, and the first payment is on December 31st. Okay, that's our annual payment of $206,810.46. So, which was less, that annual payment at 2.83 is significantly less than it would be at 4.
Yeah, I get that, but my question was, I get it now. Like, regardless if we didn't use the money, we're making these payments at the end of the year. Say if these projects didn't get underway or some of them, we still are paying on that.
Correct. We would be paying on that but the intent here is that if
To
we're
get
moving
things-
forward and get these moving forward.
Oh, I understand, yeah.
To be clear on the water treatment plant, it's already ready for tender documents. We had already expended funds for the detailed design with the Manitoba Water Services Board, and so that detailed design is complete, and that water treatment plant, we just received the tender documents, which means that we'll be going on to tender on the water treatment plant, and then it'll be started sometime this spring, which means money would be flowing. The difference is, we would have been paying for this through our line of credit, and that would have had an impact, especially if we had two huge or large projects.
Yeah, no, I get it, but I get it now, let's say something happened and the project didn't get going for 6 months.
Correct.
It's not our intent. And you answered we're still paying X amount of dollars at the end of the year, regardless of what we do with that money.
Exactly. And
That was my question.
And just to be clear as well, that will be built into our budget for 2021 and beyond, as part of our process.
Okay, I just wanted to,
Yeah, and I guess the easiest way for me to think about it is, as you say, Councillor Sutherland, like if something should happen and we don't get started right away, we still make that payment. It's the same thing if we don't get the South End Sewer project finished this year, we're still gonna make that payment.
Yeah, that's
correct.
It could go into next year, but we still have to make that payment at the end of
yeah,
the year.
that's where I wasn't clear.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, construction and payment shouldn't matter,
no,
because at the end of the day, if construction gets delayed, we're making payments now, and we'll still complete our payments by December 31st, 2040.
Yeah.
sounds
No,
so far away. Okay, are there any other questions on bylaw 9 of 2021? Go ahead, David Horbus. Councillor Horbus, did you have a question? Go ahead then, please.
Please go ahead, Councilor Horbus.
I'm trying.
There you go.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yeah. So on these payments, is that, can we, if you were, had money or something, could you pay it out? Is there a penalty? Or is this like a term loan or whatever? Well, it says term on it, so.
It's a term loan. If you had money, could you make early payments like a mortgage? Normally, the bank takes that into consideration, but I guess the big question would be, is that the appropriate use of, that would be a decision of council, we could investigate at that time. But right now, you built it into your budget scheme, and that's taken into consideration over the next 20 years, like many of your capital projects. So usually there's not a significant advantage to start paying those off at an earlier stage, because you built your entire process to accommodate that payment on a yearly basis.
So basically, it doesn't matter if you won a lottery or something and you wanted to pay it off, you'd still have to pay. You could, it would be no advantage to pay it off. Is it fixed or no?
If you won a lottery, there would be the discussion at that point, what would be the requirement? As in anything, any kind of loan, the bank, of course, takes into consideration the interest that they're getting over the 20 years. So you'd be walking away from a long-term loan, so there would be some charges. How significant would be determined at that point. And so that would be.
I thought the interest rate was like 2.2 or 2.1. Has it gone up or?
The personal interest rate is different than what we're getting.
So that's the best rate there is for that, is 2.8.
Right now, that's the best rate that we know of. I was just talking with the CAO from the Arm of St. Andrews the other day, last Friday as a matter of fact, and in our discussions, he was talking about 3.1 or 3.2 was what he was looking at getting as the best rate until I told him about the Royal Bank. So he was also going to explore that because that is a significant rate compared to anywhere. It's better than what we would get as a provincial rate right now.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, are there any other questions on bylaws, on the bylaws that we're looking at, and specifically 9 of 2021? If not, I will ask for the resolution. Mr. CAO, if you could read that for us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Resolved, bylaw number 9-2021, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 13 of 2020, which provided for the expenditure and borrowing of funds to construct and establish phase 1 of the South St. Clements Utilities infrastructure be given first reading.
Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Strang, Councillor Bazarowicz seconds. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried.
I got a question after the fact.
Okay.
So you mentioned 20 years, that's what the loan's gonna be, 20 years?
Correct.
So I thought we did some math there, and as we've got the buy-ins, that this would be paid down, so what, we're gonna take the money and bank it for 20 years?
Sorry, the buy-ins?
Yeah.
The buy-ins are, would be utilized as part of the RM's ability, funds that would come in to pay for that utility infrastructure. So there's, as a buy-in cost, there's a cost of installing the curb stops in case of the sewer, and what the curb stop costs take into consideration a buy-in to the utility itself. And that pays for the overall debt that that utility has. This would be part of that debt. The opportunity is, as we make this available, there will be an opportunity to review what's happening in Lockport. Because part of the challenge was that the rates that have been established in Lockport, from my understanding, took into consideration as a utility the cost of replacing the Lockport treatment plant. Because it was running out of, it was at its life expectancy. This project now allows us to direct sewer and bypass the Lockport water and wastewater treatment plant, which allows us now to start looking at doing a rate review to reduce those or harmonize all our rates because everyone is utilizing the same at-large utility, which is the East Selkirk sewage treatment area, lagoon. And so the intent here is that this will give us some of that capacity. The funds that are collected go into a utility expansion reserve or help to pay down whatever debts there is. So that comes down to a cash flow and analysis for the utility itself.
Okay, and then on top of that, ISEP comes in.
The advantage of ISEP is if it comes in, then we're able to expand all the way up to phase 2, phase 3, phase 4.
So we'll just keep going.
So give us and the cost to the utility and the cost to the ratepayers is less because now we're not doing, or we're not having to pay for it from funds from the RM. And so there's some advantage to waiting a few months to see if ISEP is in fact approved this year, but we already waited last year. We ended the year before, and the discussion we've had with council is every year you wait, you're looking at construction inflation minimum 10% or more per year.
Yeah, just to comment on the ISIP, I'm sure that everybody here knows, but we actually passed those resolutions and made application at the end of June of 2019 for those ISIP grants. So it's going to be 2 years. Go ahead, Councillor Spicer.
But even before that, you did another grant application that said whether you could apply for the second grant application. So it's been
A long time,
quite a while,
yes.
like about 4 years.
And they're still saying that we will know before this session of the ledge is done whether we're getting any money or not. That was the latest I heard, so who knows?
Overall, just so it's clear, the overall ISEP application was up to $15 million as identification for the overall expansion. That's including lateral lines and curb stops and further upgrades as necessary.
But broken into phases.
Broken into phases, correct.
Great.
And so the intent here is now the buy-in fee helps to get those phases done without having to resort for additional borrowing.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? I see we have on our agenda number 4 to go in camera. Did you have something?
We were,
Oh,
I know we had,
okay. We
oh, we did,
We did, yes, we did. Did you have anything that you wanted to discuss?
No, that was
in
just
camera?
standard as part of the in-camera.
Yeah.
Because it's a special meeting, we didn't identify any in-camera items,
Right,
so I can't add any more.
okay. All right, so if there's nothing else that we're going to discuss today, we're at the end of our agenda, and I will ask for a resolution to adjourn.
Resolved, this meeting of council be adjourned on Wednesday, March 24th at 10:12 a.m.
Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Bazarowicz, Councillor Boulanger seconds. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, opposed, and that is carried. Have a good rest of the week, everybody.
If you wanted to talk now, once we...
Oh, okay,
get
just
going.
don't hang up anybody. I don't know if there's, do you want to close that door, if there's anything that you want to share?
Yes.
Sure. The camera's shut off.
We're just going to wait for the recording to be completed.
Just give us an